Britain's inflation rate is double America's. Double. And it's not bad luck, it's sabotage. In the next 6 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly who destroyed the British economy, how they did it, and why you should be terrified if your country's making the same mistakes. Because this isn't just about the UK anymore. This is a masterclass in economic suicide, and the final exam is coming for all of us. Meet Margaret, 71 years old, taught English literature for 40 years. Last winter, she wore 3 coats inside her own home because her pension couldn't cover both heating and groceries. This month, she went back to work, stacking shelves at Tesco at £7 an hour because inflation ate her retirement alive. Margaret isn't an outlier. She's Britain. Let me show you the scoreboard. Among the world's richest democracies, the UK ranks dead last in controlling inflation. The United States? About 3%. Germany? 3.5%. France, Japan, Canada. All hovering between 3 and 4%. Meanwhile, Britain's stuck between 6 and 8% and has been for over a year. This isn't some boring economics debate. This is the sound of an entire country going broke in real time. Parents skipping meals so their kids can eat. Workers getting pay raises that evaporate before the next rent check. Pensioners like Margaret choosing between electricity and dignity. And here's the part that makes my blood boil. This is the same Britain that spent decades lecturing the entire world about fiscal responsibility. Tighten your belts, they said. Control your spending, they preached. The proud professor of economic discipline just failed its own test. So what the hell happened? The answer isn't one disaster, it's 5. 5 catastrophic decisions that stacked on top of each other like a Jenga tower built by blind optimists. And when it finally collapsed, the people who built it walked away untouched while Margaret put on that 3rd coat. Let's start with the big one. The decision that poisoned everything that came after. Brexit, June 2016. Britain votes to leave the European Union, the world's largest free trade zone, because politicians promised sovereignty and control. What they delivered was economic self-harm with a side of paperwork. Overnight, every product crossing the English Channel got slower, more expensive and buried under red tape. Trucks that used to breeze through borders now wait for hours, sometimes days. Customs forms, inspections, tariffs, bureaucracy thick enough to choke an elephant, and the costs passed directly to you. By 2023, food inflation in the UK was running 5 to 8 percentage points higher than France and Germany. Let me say that again. British families are paying up to 8% more for the same groceries their European neighbors buy, for no reason other than a political decision made 7 years ago. Remember the promises? Cheaper food, better trade deals, sunlit uplands. Fast forward to today. The uplands are a wasteland, and even the sun filed for asylum in Portugal. But Brexit didn't destroy the economy alone. It just cracked the foundation. What came next? That's when things got truly reckless. Because while the house was already shaking, the Bank of England decided to pour gasoline on the cracks and light a match. Here's what you need to understand. Central banks have one job during inflation: raise interest rates fast and early to cool down the economy. It's Economics 101. The U.S. Federal Reserve got it. They started hiking rates aggressively in early 2022. The European Central Bank followed close behind. And the Bank of England? They hit snooze. For months, they kept rates near zero, insisting inflation was transitory. Apparently, their economic forecast came from a magic 8-ball. While America's Fed moved decisively, Britain's central bank sat frozen, flooding an overheating economy with cheap money. House prices exploded. Consumer spending went wild. Every warning light on the economic dashboard flashed red, and they did nothing. By the time the Bank of England finally woke up, inflation wasn't just high, it had metastasized into the entire system. So they had no choice but to slam the brakes harder than anyone else. Interest rates skyrocketed. Mortgage payments doubled overnight. Small businesses collapsed under loan costs they never saw coming. Waiting to raise rates when inflation is already roaring isn't cautious, it's cowardice. And the British people are paying the price for that hesitation with every bill, every trip to the store, every impossible choice between rent and food. But if you think that's bad, wait until you hear what the politicians did next. Because just when the economy needed stability most, Britain's government turned into a geopolitical circus. 3 prime ministers in 3 months. Let that sink in. Johnson trusts Sunak. Each one promised stability. Each one delivered chaos. Boris Johnson turned Downing Street into a scandal factory. Partygate, lies to Parliament, resignation in disgrace. Trust in government? Gone. Then came Liz Truss. Oh, Liz Truss, 44 days. That's all it took for her to nearly detonate the entire British economy. She announced massive unfunded tax cuts, triggered a bond market meltdown, crashed the pound to record lows, and almost vaporized pension funds overnight. Historians will study her tenure as a case study in how to speedrun economic destruction. She lasted less time than a head of lettuce. Literally. A British newspaper put a lettuce on a live stream to see which would last longer. The lettuce won. Rishi Sunak came next, projecting calm billionaire energy, while regular people chose between heating and eating. Investors looked at this revolving circus and thought, why would I put money there? And they didn't. Here's the truth. Uncertainty kills economies faster than bad policy. Businesses freeze hiring. Investors flee. Inflation digs in deeper because nobody knows what insane decision is coming next week. You cannot fight inflation while your government implodes every other Tuesday. It's like trying to bail out a sinking boat while the crew has a fistfight on deck. But even if Britain somehow stabilized its leadership, there's another crisis lurking underneath, one that nobody in power wants to talk about. The structural rot eating the economy from the inside. Britain calls itself a modern economy, but when the energy crisis hit, it looked more like a museum exhibit running on candlelight and prayers. Over 80% of UK homes heat with natural gas. The country generates a third of its electricity from it. So when Russia choked off European supply and global prices exploded, British households got crushed. Energy bills didn't just rise, they tripled. Across Europe, France's nuclear-heavy grid softened the blow. Norway swam in surplus. Even Germany, scrambling to build LNG terminals, recovered faster. But Britain? It sat on its hands and its North Sea oil reserves, pretending the free market would fix everything. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Decades of underinvestment in energy infrastructure finally came due. The UK literally sits on oil and gas, yet millions of its people can't afford to turn on the heat. Food banks report parents skipping meals to pay utility bills. Factories shut down because running the machines costs more than the products they make. And here's the cruelest irony. High energy costs don't just hurt households. They infect every corner of the economy. Transportation, manufacturing, food production, everything gets more expensive when energy is unaffordable. Which brings us to the ugliest truth of all. The one problem that explains why Britain can't escape this nightmare even if it fixes everything else. Productivity collapse. For 15 years, the UK's productivity growth has flatlined. Productivity is the silent engine of prosperity. It's how much value each worker creates per hour. When productivity grows, wages can rise without causing inflation. When it stalls, you get exactly what Britain has now, people working harder than ever while getting poorer. Since 2008, British productivity growth has been the worst in the G7. America rebuilt and innovated after the recession. Germany invested in technology and training. Even France, with its famous short work weeks, outpaced the UK. Meanwhile, British workers grind themselves to exhaustion in an economy stuck in the same gear it was in 17 years ago. Why? Chronic underinvestment in technology, infrastructure older than most people's grandparents, regional inequality so extreme it's practically medieval. London thrives while the North rots. And after Brexit, a brain drain. Talented young people quietly booking one-way tickets to countries that still believe in the future. Low productivity means every product takes more time, more effort, more cost to make. And guess who pays for that inefficiency? You do. Inflation isn't just imported or temporary here, it's baked into the system, homegrown and structural. For a country that loves calling itself a knowledge economy, Britain seems to have forgotten how to grow. And if you think that's the end of the bad decisions, buckle up. Because Brexit broke something else nobody wanted to admit. Something that turned a crisis into a catastrophe. Turns out, when you tell millions of workers to leave your country, they actually do. Shocking, right? Brexit didn't just mess with trade, it gutted the workforce. Over 500,000 EU workers vanished. Truck drivers, farm laborers, healthcare workers, hospitality staff, gone. And they didn't come back. Crops rotted in fields because there was nobody to pick them. Supermarket shelves went empty because there were no drivers. Pubs and restaurants closed early because there was no one left to serve drinks or cook food. France and Germany kept their labor forces intact. Britain decided to take back control and took out the workers who kept the lights on. The government spun it as building a high-wage economy. What they actually built was labor shortage inflation. Fewer workers mean you have to pay more to fill jobs, and businesses pass those costs straight to customers. It's supply and demand at its most brutal. And the punchline? After years of telling EU workers to go home, the UK now issues emergency visas begging them to come back. It's like a bad breakup where you spend 2 years being cruel, then show up drunk at their door at 2 a.m., asking for another chance. Economic policy as romantic tragedy. So with all these failures piling up, you'd think the government would take responsibility, right? Admit mistakes, change course, fix the problems? Yeah, about that. When all else fails, find a villain. In Britain's case, that means blaming corporate greed and Putin's price hikes. It's convenient, it's easy, and it's spectacularly dishonest. Sure, some corporations absolutely cashed in. Energy companies posted record profits. Supermarkets quietly widened their margins. But here's the problem with that narrative. Germany, France, and the US faced the same greedy corporations and the same Russian energy shocks. Yet their inflation dropped back to 3 or 4%, while Britain stayed stuck at 7%. So either British CEOs are uniquely evil, or maybe, just maybe, the problem is homegrown. Blaming greed is political theater. It lets politicians grandstand, announce windfall taxes, and pretend they're heroes fighting villains, all while ignoring the decades of terrible decisions, underinvestment, and catastrophic leadership that made inflation so sticky in the first place. If you misdiagnose the disease, the treatment won't work. And Britain's been prescribing slogans instead of solutions. Meanwhile, while politicians point fingers and corporations count profits, real people are drowning. Margaret's not alone. There's James, a 34-year-old nurse driving 2 hours each way to work because he can't afford to live near his hospital. There's Amara, a graduate with a degree in engineering, who just booked a one-way flight to Toronto because staying means career suicide. There's thousands queuing outside food banks, working full-time jobs, unable to afford groceries, child poverty at record highs, homelessness rising month after month, millions trapped in fuel poverty, a term that shouldn't exist in the 7th largest economy on Earth. Inflation isn't just an economic problem. It's psychological warfare. It erodes dignity. It breeds exhaustion. It makes people feel like they've done everything right, worked hard, played by the rules, saved responsibly, and still lost. And the cruelest part? The people who caused this, politicians, bankers, policymakers, they'll never feel it. They live comfortably above the wreckage they created. So where does this end? Here's the bad news. It doesn't. Not anytime soon. While the US flirts with a soft landing, Britain's trapped in turbulence. The damage from Brexit isn't temporary, it's structural. The missing workers aren't coming back next quarter. Productivity won't leap because of a nice speech. Energy dependence keeps the country one pipeline failure away from another disaster. High inflation becomes self-fulfilling. Workers demand raises to survive, businesses hike prices to cover costs, and the cycle loops endlessly. The Bank of England's late response means rates must stay painfully high just to keep inflation from spiraling further, choking what little growth remains. It's the worst possible trade-off. Crush the economy to kill inflation, or let inflation devour savings and stability. Britain's staring at stagflation, the nightmare economists thought died in the 70s. And the tragedy? None of this was inevitable. Brexit was a choice. The Bank of England's delays were choices. Decades of underinvestment, choices. The political circus, all choices. This wasn't fate or bad luck or a global conspiracy. This was governance by wishful thinking, ideology over arithmetic, short-term politics, destroying long-term prosperity. The nation that once built a global empire on trade and innovation now struggles to keep the lights on and groceries affordable. The country that taught the world economic discipline can't manage price stability at home, and the people who made these decisions, they'll be fine. Cushioned by wealth, book deals, and speeches about resilience. The suffering belongs to Margaret, to James, to Amara, to millions who trusted the system and got betrayed. So let this be a warning to every country watching, to every voter tempted by easy promises and nostalgic fantasy, to everyone who thinks it can't happen here. Britain didn't just lose control of inflation, It lost the plot entirely, and if your leaders are making the same mistakes, putting ideology over evidence, slogans over strategy, politics over people, then you're next. The question is, will you see it coming? So here's what I want you to do. Look at your own country right now. Is your government selling you easy answers to complex problems? Are they blaming outsiders instead of fixing what's broken? Are they sacrificing your future for their next election? Drop a comment and tell me, what decision is your country making right now that feels like Britain's Brexit moment? What's the lie they're selling that'll cost you a decade? Because Margaret trusted the system. James believed the promises. Amara played by the rules, and they all lost. Don't let that be you. Share this with someone who needs to see it. And if you want to understand how to protect yourself when your government makes these mistakes, hit subscribe, because that's exactly what we're covering next. The collapse was preventable. The question is, are you paying attention?